The forest was still there. The maps insisted it wasn't. Visitors could still drive there. Campers still spent weekends inside it. Search and rescue teams occasionally operated within its boundaries. Yet sometime in 2017, the National Park Service quietly removed the entire area from its maps. The roads remained. The rivers remained. The hiking trails remained. Only the forest itself lost its identity. Nobody announced the change. No public statement was issued. Most people failed to notice for years. The discovery happened by accident. A volunteer working at a visitor center was helping a family plan a hiking trip when she compared two editions of the same park map. One version identified the forest by name. The newer edition showed a blank space covering thousands of acres. At first glance, nothing looked unusual. The terrain was still there. The landmarks were still there. The omission only became obvious when both maps were placed side by side. The volunteer assumed a printing mistake had slipped through production. A replacement map showed the same blank area. So did every newer edition she could find. The deeper she looked, the stranger the situation became. Brochures printed before 2017 described the forest in detail. Recent publications avoided naming it entirely. Trail guides referenced locations inside the area without explaining where those locations actually were. Archived ranger reports mentioned campsites that no longer appeared on official documents. The forest remained physically unchanged. Only its presence in government records seemed to be fading. Curiosity eventually reached a retired park ranger. He had spent nearly 2 decades working in that section of wilderness before leaving the service. After hearing about the missing name, he searched through boxes of old paperwork stored in his garage. What he found transformed an obscure mapping error into something far more unsettling. The oldest files looked ordinary: wildlife surveys, maintenance schedules, visitor statistics. Then the document suddenly changed. Entire pages had been removed. References pointed toward attachments that no longer existed. Paragraphs ended halfway through explanations. Several incident reports contained case numbers with no corresponding records. Someone had spent years removing information from files that were never meant for public release. The missing pages all appeared connected to the same section of forest. Nobody knew why, and that question became even harder to ignore after people discovered the area was still producing new reports. The reports were recent. That was what frightened people. The forest had supposedly been removed from official attention years earlier. Yet documents continued appearing inside internal databases. Several were obtained through public records requests. Others were anonymously leaked online. Many looked incomplete. Most contained routine information. A few stood out immediately. One described a search operation involving 3 hikers who failed to return from a weekend trip. The location field was blacked out. The names of responding personnel had been removed. Only the final paragraph remained readable, It stated that the search had been suspended after entering a restricted section of the forest. No further explanation followed. Another report described an abandoned campsite discovered deep inside the same region. Equipment remained untouched. Vehicles were still parked nearby. The occupants were never located. Investigators eventually found more than 40 reports carrying similar language. Different dates, different personnel, different circumstances, the same destination. Every incident led back to the unnamed section of forest. Public interest exploded. Online communities began collecting maps, ranger logs, satellite imagery, and witness accounts. Most theories focused on government secrecy. People assumed military testing was taking place. Others suggested environmental contamination. A few believed the area concealed an undisclosed research facility. None of those explanations survived long. Satellite imagery complicated everything. The forest looked normal from above. Trees covered the landscape. Streams followed predictable routes. No buildings appeared hidden beneath the canopy. The mystery should have ended there. Instead, researchers noticed another anomaly. Historical satellite images did not always match one another. The differences were subtle. A clearing appeared in one year and vanished in another. A dirt road shifted several hundred yards between image sets. A ridgeline seemed slightly altered despite no evidence of erosion. The changes were too small to attract public attention. They were also difficult to explain. The most controversial discovery came from aerial surveys conducted before the forest lost its name. The surveys referenced a fire lookout tower. Coordinates were included. Maintenance logs existed. Photographs existed. The tower itself did not. Expeditions searching the coordinates found an empty hilltop. No foundation. No debris. No evidence that any structure had ever stood there. Yet archived documents proved the tower had once been inspected regularly. Former employees remembered climbing it. One retired ranger even described the view from the top. Researchers eventually interviewed dozens of former staff members. Most agreed on one point. Working inside that section of forest felt different. Nobody described monsters. Nobody described supernatural events. Their stories were much stranger. People frequently lost track of time. Distances felt inconsistent. Locations became difficult to relocate. Several rangers described reaching landmarks that seemed to move between visits. A stream recorded in one survey appeared hundreds of yards away during the next. A campsite marked on maps became impossible to locate despite detailed directions. The inconsistencies accumulated for years. Eventually, the agency stopped updating public information about the area altogether. That decision remained hidden until the leaked reports appeared online. The strongest evidence arrived unexpectedly. A former GIS analyst contacted an investigative journalist. For years, he had worked with mapping data supplied to federal agencies. According to his statement, The unnamed forest created recurring problems inside multiple systems. Boundaries shifted. Coordinates changed. Reference points drifted. The software repeatedly flagged errors. Technicians corrected them. The errors returned. At first, everyone assumed corrupted data was responsible. The explanation worked until different systems began producing the same anomalies independently. The analyst claimed one internal memo circulated among staff for several months. He remembered only a single sentence from the document. The sentence was never officially released. According to him, it read, "The area cannot be mapped reliably because the area does not remain consistent." Nobody outside the agency could verify the memo. The statement spread rapidly anyway. Years passed. The forest remained open. Visitors continued entering. Most experienced nothing unusual. A small number reported encounters that kept the story alive. One group followed a marked trail and arrived at a lake absent from every map they carried. A hunter described finding survey markers bearing identification numbers that belonged to locations miles away. Several hikers independently photographed the same wooden sign. Each image displayed a different distance to the nearest ranger station. Attempts to revisit the sign failed. Nobody could find it again. The National Park Service never commented publicly on the missing forest name. Requests for clarification received routine administrative responses. Questions about leaked reports were ignored. Questions about altered maps received no answer at all. The silence only increased public fascination. Today, the forest still exists. People hike there, camp there, fish there, photograph there. Most return with nothing unusual to report. Yet former rangers, researchers, and local residents continue sharing the same warning. If you visit the unnamed section of forest, bring a map. Bring a GPS. Bring whatever navigation equipment you trust. Then compare every result carefully. Because according to the people who spent the most time there, the danger was never getting lost inside the forest. The danger was discovering that the forest could no longer agree on where it was.